Thank you so much, Prabhu. Sorry, I'm going to do this myself. Jai Hare Krishna devotees, thank you so much for joining our Sunday feast today. And we'll get started. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So the title of today's class is Finding the Spark of Joy, or Sparking Joy in Our Spiritual Life. So before we get into this topic, I want to actually share a story that happened a few months ago. So a few months ago, it was one of those days that I had at work. And it was a very rough day. I had conversations with some members of my team that was not favorable. And I was just dealing with like tons of issues at work. I started my work day at 7 in the morning. I couldn't do any of my morning sadhana. And I was working till like 7 in the evening. And then I had, Rupsagar wasn't at home that day. So then I had to go cook and clean. And it was just a whole day of just doing stuff nonstop. And it was about 10 o'clock at night when I realized, when I saw something that I hadn't seen all day, which was my bead bag. So it was 10 o'clock at night. I hadn't chanted a single round. I hadn't spent a single moment in thinking about Krishna because I was so worked up, so stressed out because there's just so much going on. So I decided, because I took a vow, I have to chant. So I just took my beads out of my bead bag and I sat down to chant. But when I was sitting down to chant, because you've heard in classes, you've read in books about how when you chant, you get to actually focus on the lotus feet of the Lord. You get to meditate on the form of Lord. But because my mind was so agitated, so frustrated, and so angry that day, this is how my chanting was going, which was very distracted, very inattentive, questioning what the 11th offense was, and definitely not in the way japa should have been going on. I was very distracted. And in this distraction of japa, and those of you who've been to my house know, I usually chant in our study. So actually the blue couch that you see behind, that is my japa kutir, or whatever you call that, my japa spot. And you can see the whole variety of books around me. So I chant in this spot. So because I was so distracted, I wasn't watching TV, I was distracted. So I started walking around and I started looking at the various books that I had here. And while I was looking at these books, I remembered something that I had heard on this TV show that I had watched on Netflix called Tidying Up with Marie Kondo. And in that show, Marie Kondo talks about how you should have only 30 books in your house. And while I was doing japa, I was like thinking, oh, which of my hundreds of books would I give up if I just have to have 30 books in my house? Mind you, this is while I'm chanting. I'm being very honest here. I was very distracted japa. But while I was meditating instead of the holy name on Marie Kondo, I remembered something that Marie Kondo says when she talks about cleaning up your house. She always says the statement that you need to discard everything that does not spark joy in your life. And at this point, I had to stop my japa because it made me think, like, do I find joy in my Krishna consciousness? Am I actually happy to be in Krishna consciousness? Do I get the butterflies when I think that I get to pick up the holy name, I get to pick up my bead bag and chant? Do I get tears of ecstasy as I'm chanting the holy name of Krishna? The answer was no, clearly, because I was doing distracted japa. But it made me think, like, Marie Kondo talks about how you need to discard everything that doesn't spark joy in your life. Now, I obviously cannot discard my japa. I cannot discard my spiritual life, because how can I discard my Krishna consciousness? Despite of it not making me happy all the time, despite of it being a challenge all the time, I do know that Krishna consciousness is a part of my identity. I do know this is a vow I've taken to my spiritual master. This is who I want to be for the rest of my life. So it made me realize that instead of discarding that doesn't spark joy, I need to find how to find joy in my Krishna consciousness. How can I find the spark of joy in my Krishna consciousness so that I don't have to discard my Krishna consciousness, instead focus on discarding everything that doesn't spark joy in my Krishna consciousness. The idea of Krishna consciousness being happy is inherent in our philosophy. Our book is not called Chant and Be Sometimes Happy. Our book doesn't say chant and then you will become happy. Our book doesn't say you finished it. No, the Prabhupada called this book so powerfully, chant and be happy. And this is a phrase Prabhupada used again and again, which means chanting the holy name by default has to make you happy. You see Prabhupada smiling so many times in his pictures. You see devotees in so much of joy when they're chanting the holy name. So the holy name inherently, or Krishna conscious inherently, is designed to make you find spark in your joy. In the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna talks about this, how this knowledge of bhakti is the most confidential knowledge, Rajavidya Rajaguhyam, Pavitram idamuttamam, Pratyaksha Vaganam Dharmyam, Susukam Kartum Avyayam. Susukam means joy, supreme joy. So the idea of bhakti has to be supreme joy. His Holiness Bhakticharya Maharaj says this beautiful quote in reference to that verse. Maharaj has shared that spiritual life is not dry. It is also executed happily. Susukam. The result of that is not just happiness, but bliss, spiritual joy. So this comes to, we understand from here that bhakti is supposed to be happy. Bhakti is supposed to make you joyful. It doesn't mean you're going to be joyful all the time, because just as it is with anything, it takes some work to be joyful, right? I don't remember which speaker this was, but they said in a class that, if you're married, it's not that every day morning you wake up and think, I'm so blessed to be married. I'm so blessed to be sharing my life with this spouse of mine. Like, I'm so fortunate, and I get butterflies and wings and everything when I think about my spouse. No, that doesn't happen. Some days it might happen, like Roopsagar got me those flowers a few days ago. It made me very happy. It brought joy in our relationship. Does it happen every day? No, it doesn't. But why? But we still continue at it, right? Because it's a relationship. So it started this while thinking about how do you find joy in your spiritual life. I kind of came upon a few realizations that I had. That one of a fundamental realization that we don't find enough joy in our Krishna consciousness sometimes is because we don't have connection. We don't know enough about Krishna. If I know enough about somebody or an activity or an object, then I know that I enjoy it, then I will enjoy it. For example, I'm assuming everyone here on this call has tasted, I know Gitamrita doesn't like Gulab Jamun, so this is a bad example for Gitamrita, but for everybody else on this call, you've seen a Gulab Jamun. You have tasted a Gulab Jamun. You have experienced, and today's Ekadashi, so sorry devotees, really bad day for me to talk about Gulab Jamun, but I cannot talk about a good Ekadashi sweet, and it has to be Gulab Jamun. The joy that you get when you push a Gulab Jamun down, the syrup is just dripping, you put it in your mouth, it is ecstatic, right? But how do we all know that? Because we've all experienced it. Now, if you meet somebody on the street who's never tasted a Gulab Jamun and you describe it to them, they may only get half joy because you just described it. But when they actually taste the nectar, that's when you get full joy. So today we're going to talk about how do we taste the nectar of Krishna consciousness to help us find that spark of joy. And when we find that spark of joy, our next step is fanning that spark of joy so that we are constantly able to find peace, positivity, and joy within our heart. The Bhagavad Gita talks about this idea of how you can find happiness. The Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, in chapter 2, verse 66, Krishna says, Nasti buddhir ayuktasya, nacha yuktasya bhavana, nacha bhavayata shanti, ashantasya kuta sukham. One who is not connected with the Supreme and Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be happiness without peace? And this is beautiful because Krishna in the 2nd chapter of the Gita is already telling us that the only way we can have happiness and peace is by connecting with Krishna. Next week, we're extremely, extremely fortunate to have Her Grace Dasi speak about how we can connect to Krishna through forms of service and how that helps us find peace. So today's class is kind of like a prelude to Mother Radha's very deep, beautiful class on how more we can engage service to connect with Krishna. But the idea is that unless we're connected with the Supreme, there is no way we can be peaceful and there's no way we can be happy. So Krishna is clearly saying that in the Bhagavad Gita. So today, we'll talk about how we can find happiness and the spark of joy. With that is how we can get to peace as well. Before we get started, we will chant our Mangala Charan prayers and seek blessings from Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis and from the entire Guru Parampara. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Tapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha, Shri Rupam Sagrajatam, Sahagana Raghunathan Tam Stajivam, Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam, Krishna Chaitanya Devam, Shri Radha Krishna Padan, Sahagana Lalita, Shri Vishakanvitanscha, He Krishna Karuna Sindhu, Dina Bandho Jagatpate, Gopesha Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta Namostate, Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi, Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanusute Devi, Pranamami Haripriye, Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya, Kripa Sindhubhyo Evacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharane, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, Pasyatya Desha Tarane, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Mukam Karoti Vachalam, Pangam Nangayate Viram, Yatripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinatarinam. So seeking blessings from all senior Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis as we continue with this talk. Everything here today is shared from purports of Srila Prabhupada and from various scriptures. So we will kind of dive deep into how can we find happiness by getting connected to Krishna. So when we talked about sparking joy, and the quote that Marie Kondo talks about is discard anything that doesn't spark joy to you. It talks about, basically you can understand two fundamental things from it, is that we have to enhance the favorable and discard the unfavorable. Whenever, if you look at your house, right, if any of you all have ever done a binge cleaning of your house, you may throw away things that are expired, or things that, like binge cleaning of your fridge or your pantry. You may throw away things that are expired, or you may throw away things that you don't need. But it doesn't mean that once you throw it away, you won't replenish it, right? It's natural. What you do is you discard the expired and then you get new stuff. And that is the nature of life, right? You discard the unfavorable and enhance the favorable. This tip that has now become very popular, like, so many people follow it, is actually described in our Bhagavad Gita itself in chapter 2, where Krishna talks about the importance of discarding the unfavorable for us to find peace. In Bhagavad Gita verse 271, Krishna says, Vihaya kamanya sarvan Pumam charati nispraha nirmamo nirahankaraha sashantim adi gacchati. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. And we've heard from verse 266 that the only way we can be happy or find spark of joy in our life is by attaining real peace. Here Krishna clearly has given us the tips on how we can find real peace. So Krishna here in this verse tells us that we need to give up our desire for sense gratification, we need to give up a sense of proprietorship, and we need to let go of our false ego. It's just 3 points, seemingly very simple, but actually very difficult to do. By nature, when we come to this material world, we come with this desire, to think that we're superior. We come here because we want to be gratified. And we want to be pleased. That is why we're here in this material world, because we want to get the pleasure from everything that is around us. It is very hard to give up that desire for sense gratification. It is equally hard to give up the sense of proprietorship. How often do we say objects are mine? My phone, my mouse, my water bottle, my bead bag. Do we ever say, this is Krishna's phone? Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not Gopalchandra Prabhu Sam Krishna. We never say, this is Krishna's phone, this is Krishna's bead bag, this is Krishna's scissors. No, even for small objects like this, we believe that we are proprietors. And because our desire of proprietorship starts with something small, we think we're entitled to this whole world. We start to believe in this nature that this world is ours. We own this world. We are the masters of this universe. And that comes from the false ego. False ego, which is the root of so many of our anarthas, comes from this misidentification with who we are. Because we misidentify with who we are, we think we own everything. And because we think we own everything, our desire for getting pleasure from something that we think we own naturally increases. So the easiest way for us to actually start to give up all of this is by tackling false ego first. is by constantly reminding ourselves who we are, that we are nothing but parts and parcels of the Lord, that every single thing that is present in front of us, whether it's a water bottle, our phone, our glasses, our bead bag, everything we have only and only because of mercy of the Lord. And when we start reminding ourselves that again and again and again and again, then it is easier for us to, to forgo the sense of proprietorship, and naturally it's easier for us to desire sense gratification. I heard once in a seminar, when it's on goal setting, I had heard for work, they talked about how very often people have a tendency when they make resolutions or when they make goals in a negative way versus in a positive frame of mind, it's very difficult to keep that goal. So when you make a goal, hypothetically saying, my goal is to give up false ego, it is actually very hard. It is harder to do because you're talking about giving something up versus bringing something in your life to help you give up false ego. So in order for you to discard the unfavorable, you have to actually bring the favorable first to allow you to discard the unfavorable. Most often, why we struggle in our Krishna consciousness is we have a tendency naturally to give up first. We have a tendency, to naturally. Gopal Chandra, is it possible to mute everybody, please? Yeah, thank you. Hope devotees can hear me. Okay, cool. So it's very difficult for us to just give up false ego because it doesn't work that way, right? Like when we give up something, what do we fill it with? And that is why it is actually more important for us versus focusing on giving up to focus actually on how do we enhance our life. And we see that even in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna talks about giving up a lot of things in the earlier chapters, but later when he starts bringing the concept of bhakti, Krishna is talking about how do we add bhakti to our life. Because the minute we start adding devotion to our life, it is actually easier to give up some of these things. This idea of giving up and adding something into our life is so beautifully seen in Srila Prabhupada's life. When we read the Lilamrita, particularly in the early days of our movement being established, Srila Prabhupada actually focused so much more in enhancing the favorable versus actually giving up the unfavorable. In the early days, when he saw that there were these like hippies and the people who were high on drugs but they were still interested in kirtan, he would open up their doors. He never cared about the situation they were in or the fact that they had no money or that they were, for a sannyasi who lived in Vrindavan, someone so pure, Srila Prabhupada, he didn't care about the externals. He focused on the fact that here were these young boys and girls who were interested in Krishna consciousness, and he fanned that spark. He made sure that they were able to experience joy in Krishna consciousness. That is why so many of Srila Prabhupada's disciples have been in this movement for not 10 years or 20 years, 40 to 50 years. Over 50 years in some cases. 50 years, to me, to think of somebody being committed to something for 50 years, I can't even fathom in my head how that's possible. But you see that in Prabhupada's disciples because Prabhupada enhanced the favorable for them. And when you start bringing more favorable things into your life, into our heart, it is easier for us to actually get rid of the unfavorable. So even though Krishna in 271 talks about how we can give up the unfavorable to find peace, today, we're actually going to focus most of this class on how do we enhance the favorable. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna in multiple verses talks about the favorable things in Krishna consciousness and how we can enhance that. Krishna talks about Manmanabha Madbhakto Madhyaji Mamnavaskuru. He talks about how we could focus our mind completely on him. Krishna talks about Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, chanting Krishna's name all the time. Krishna talks about in the 4 verses, Machita Madgata Prana, he talks about association with devotees. He talks about Tadviti Pranipatena, surrendering to a guru and inquiring positively. He talks about different kinds of ways that we can find the favorable aspects to help us spark our joy in our Krishna consciousness. But the best steps or the best ways I personally found, which I thought was very beneficial for me and hopefully for everyone else listening, that enhances the favorable was looking not in the Bhagavad Gita, but actually looking into Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, into Nectar of Devotion, and discussing the 5 limbs that have been described. These 5 limbs come in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. They're also talked about in in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Nectar Devotion, on these 5 limbs that can help us grow in a bhakti. In verse 266, if you remember, Krishna said that the easiest way for us to attain happiness is to connect with Krishna. And I found personally that these 5 limbs that have been described of devotional service are an easy way for us to connect with Krishna. And when we connect with Krishna, we awaken our love for Krishna. Because we spoke about the example of a Gulab Jamun, and since it's Ekadashi, I want to flip it and talk about Ekadashi carrot halwa. You know, if you really want to find the joy in Ekadashi carrot halwa, you have to connect with it. You have to invest time in it. You know, and any time we want to find happiness in something, you have to invest time in it, right? If you look at our life, things that make us happy, whether it is a person or whether it is an object, whether it is the Lord, it doesn't come instantaneously. It may come instantaneously, as Gadadhar Pandit Prabhu spoke about a few months ago when he gave class about the utsamai, right? In our beginning, our enthusiasm sometimes causes us to get this instant, like quick, this quick trigger of happiness. But in order to sustain that happiness, we have to make effort in it. Think about any relationship it is, right? Whether it is with a child or with a spouse or with a parent, it doesn't, your love for your whoever you're connecting with doesn't come without putting effort. It does not come without putting effort at all. And similarly, that is also how it's with Krishna. That we expect sometimes, or I sometimes expect that when I pick up my bead bag and start saying the holy name, I'm instantly connected to Krishna. I'm instantly supposed to feel the joy. I'm instantly supposed to have ecstatic symptoms that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes in Shikshashtakam, where my hair is, Vadanam Gadgada Ruddhaya Gilara, my hair is standing on end, tears are flowing incessantly, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because I have not taken time to invest in my relationship with Krishna. Chanting is a way for us to connect with Krishna, but we have to invest time in going deeper in our relationship with Krishna to understand who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. Who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? How do I know more about him? When we start knowing more about who Krishna is, that is when the love within our heart awakens. And this is such an important and a beautiful point, and that is why in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mahaprabhu says, Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagava Shravan Mathurabas Shri Murtira Shraddhaya Sevan. One should associate with devotees, chant the holy name of the Lord, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, reside at Mathura, and worship the deity with faith and veneration. Sakala sadhana shreshta e pancha anga, Krishna prema janmaya e panchera alpasanga. These 5 limbs of devotional service are the best of all. Even a slight performance of these 5 awakens love for Krishna. Isn't it so beautiful? That here Mahaprabhu is calling these 5 as not 5 path or 5 ways, it's 5 limbs. That means for a body to exist, you need limbs. And even if the slight performance of these 5, any of these 5, or slight performance of all of these 5 will begin to awaken love for Krishna. And why is that? Because each of these help us connect with Krishna. Each of these help us to understand a little bit more about who Krishna is. A little bit more about who Krishna is. And the more and more we get to know about Krishna, we get to know about Krishna's pastimes, we tend to see another facet of Krishna that we just didn't know before. And then that's the facet that makes us fall in love with Krishna all over again. And then the more and more we do that, we're constantly connected with Krishna. And then when we pick up a bead bag and then when we chant the holy name, then are we truly connected with Krishna, because we know who Krishna is. So we'll talk about all 5 today. Hopefully we have time to go through all 5, and we'll talk about what does it mean practically for us. I personally love these 5 limbs of bhakti because I'm a very foolish person, and I kind of feel like sometimes when the instruction is a little vague, I get very confused. I'm like, what does this mean? But these 5 limbs are so specific, right? It is associated with devotees, chant the holy name, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, reside at Mathura, and worship the deity. It is as specific as you can get on how we can connect with Krishna. So the first one here is Sadhu Sangha, Devotee Association. In Chaitanya Charitamrita and Madhya Leela, again Mahaprabhu says, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Kai, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hai. The verdict of all revealed scriptures is that by even a moment's association with a pure devotee, one can attain all success. This is the beauty of Sadhu Sangha. This is the power of devotee association. Now, because of COVID, we're in a position where one of the things that seemingly is the most lacking is devotee association. We're not together in person. We are not able to do services together. We're not able to get a sangha together in person. I'm not sure how long it will be before we are all actually dancing together at sadhu sangha retreat again, given the situation today. So how do we then practice sadhu sangha, in a situation we're in? Fortunately for us, there's many ways we can practice sadhu sangha today, even though we may not be in a position that is conducive for us because of the extenuating circumstances outside. We are able to associate with devotees through online classes. We're able to associate with Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis around the world with a plethora of online classes, whether it's through our temple or other temples, or hearing classes of senior devotees who you admire. All of this association is there online, which is how most of us, we all know that. But there is another kind of sadhu sangha that very often we neglect or we take for granted, is the sadhu sangha that we can have in our own house. In this, I keep joking that I actually heard in another discussion where one of the devotees was commenting about how devotees in our movement struggle from FOMO. For those of you who don't know what FOMO means, it's fear of missing out. There is so much of nectar online today that you don't know what to listen to. I'm not even kidding. Right now, as I'm giving Sunday class, there are 2 other classes that are happening, both of which I actually want to attend, but obviously I cannot attend, right? And I feel a little bad, I'm missing out on this. And in that moment of feeling bad, I'm going to miss out on that association, you realize that you're actually not being here fully present with the association you have. And that is what the association we have at our home. Now, we're so fortunate in our own houses to be in presence of devotees, our family members who are Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, and that is sadhu sangha as well. That is devotee association that is provided to us 24/7. But it is also the most neglected. Very often, and I'm guilty of this, very often we take for granted the people that you live with, who are devotees and people who you can actually grow in your Krishna consciousness with. So sadhu sangha is association with those devotees as well, so that we can grow together in our Krishna consciousness. And this COVID situation is an amazing opportunity to spend time with each other at home, is to grow in Krishna consciousness together. Sadhu sangha is also association with Srila Prabhupada in the form of his books. When we associate with Prabhupada in the form of his books, it is not different than sadhu sangha. So when devotees feel that we're not in presence of devotees, it's actually we're not in presence of each other, which is very saddening. But we do have sadhu sangha. We just have to take the opportunity to see sadhu sangha, whether in form of Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada's classes, or in family members in your house. So sadhu sangha, the more and more we associate with sadhus, whether it is Vani or Vapu, and today particular, which is that it's word of physical, and today's time it's mostly Vani, it's mostly instruction. The more we associate with sadhus by focusing on the Vani, the more we can find bliss. When Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Machitta matkata prana bodhayanta parasparam katayantasya mam nityam tushyanti charamati cha. Devotees gather together to glorify Krishna. There is so much of joy in gathering and glorifying Krishna together. And even if it's just with one other person, you start talking about the Shastras, like they just open up to you. That is the power of sadhu sangha. So a tip for COVID, if anyone here is missing sadhu sangha, take opportunity of online classes, take opportunity of the sadhus sitting in your house, and take opportunity of sadhu in the form of Srila Prabhupada's book that is sitting in our bookshelves, waiting to be picked up and read. The next limb of bhakti is described as nama kirtana, chanting the holy name. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Shikshashtakam says, Nam namakari bahuda nija sarva shaktis tatra pita niyamita smaranena kala etadrishi tava kripa bhagavan mamapi durtaivam idrisham iha janina anuraga. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I'm so unfortunate, I have no attraction for them. Chanting japa is such a wonderful way to connect with Krishna. It is our personal time with Krishna. It is one of the few things that we do that is just between us and Krishna. It is very hard to do chanting for show. It is very hard to do chanting to please others. It is very hard to do chanting for any other mundane reason other than I have to chant because my guru has told me to chant, or because Krishna wants me to chant. Chanting is our personal time with Krishna. So often, people sometimes wonder, how do you get to see Krishna? But when we are chanting our holy name, Krishna is present before us in the form of the holy name. Krishna is dancing on our tongue every time we say Krishna. He's dancing on our tongue. How fortunate are we to be given this opportunity to chant the holy name with Krishna's dancing on our tongue, and yet we take disadvantage of it. Every time I do an inattentive japa, I think about this. Like after I finish my inattentive japa, how fallen I am, and how unfortunate I am that even though Krishna is wanting to be with me, Krishna is giving me this opportunity to be with him one-on-one, I'm not taking the full advantage of it. Imagine if, you're CEO of your company, or you're, like some big celebrity that you really wanted to meet, who's very famous. And I don't want to take names because I don't know if people like that celebrity or not, but they invite you to their house and they tell you, hey, I'm right here with you. And instead of talking to them, instead of actually like asking them or like relishing that you're having the association of someone so important, you like open up your phone and start checking your WhatsApp messages, or you see what's new on Instagram, or you start texting other people or checking your email. Why would that person who's this important, who's given you time from their busy schedule to spend with you, would have appreciation for you? And imagine if you do it all the time, like, you do it once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 16 times you do it, and you continue doing it every day, then how do you think that relationship would be? And then when you get disappointed that, well, I spent some time with them, why are they not giving me what I want? Why did they not call me back to my house? Well, yeah, because you never paid attention to them. And that is how we treat our japa all the time. But when we actually get into this joy of connecting with Krishna at the holy name, when we connect through the name of the Lord and realize that the holy name is not different than Krishna himself, the joy that is experienced is so beautiful. In His Holiness Sachinandan Swami's book, The Living Name, Maharaj talks about that how this holy name is not just a name, it is actually living, on how Krishna is fully present in the Mahamantra. And the more and more we chant, the more and more joy we feel. And we're so fortunate, as Mahaprabhu says, there is not even hard and fast rules for chanting this name. Our opportunities to chant Krishna's name is unlimited. The question is, are we taking advantage of it? Are we taking advantage of it? Are we taking advantage of chanting Krishna's name? I was following Srila Prabhupada memories some time back, and I think it was Malti Prabhu speaking. The first time when Prabhupada's disciples, in 1971, where Prabhupada took his first group of disciples to go to India, they were in Surat. And in Surat, as they were walking down the streets of Surat, they noticed how all the stores had names of God. Like they had names of like Krishna and Rama and Lakshman and Hanuman. And every time these devotees saw those names, like they would bow down, because they were like, oh my God, India is such a cultured place that everywhere you go, you see a name of Krishna and Rama. Like, how special is that, right? And then when I heard that, I realized, like, I have never thought of it that way. Like, I never thought of the fact how fortunate we are that, many of our names by birth are spiritual names, or many of our stores have names of God. Like, you never think of it, because we're not thinking about these are all opportunities for us to chant the holy name of the Lord. Even though we know so much of it, even though we know just by chanting the name of Krishna, Ajamil was saved from the Yamadutas. We know all of this, and yet we don't take opportunities. If we have 24 hours a day, we have 24 hours times 60 minutes times 60 seconds times however microseconds you want to break that up to. That many infinite opportunities to chant the hundreds of million names of the Lord. The question is, are we willing to take it? So the more we're able to chant the holy name of the Lord, the more we're able to connect to Krishna, the more we're able to understand who he is, right? So first we talked about Sadhu Sangha, second is Namakirtan. The third is Bhagavad Shravan, which is reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. In Srimad Bhagavatam, in the third verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is described, Vyasadeva says, Nigama kalpataror kalitam phalam, sukha mukhat amrita travasamyutam, vivata bhagavata rasamalayam, muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavaka. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including the liberated souls. This is the power of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is the mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literatures. It is described that when mango fruit, which is the king of all fruits, when it is bitten by like parrots, it becomes even more sweeter. That is what Bhagavatam is. It is that mature fruit of the desire tree. So it was already this ripe mango. And then this is being shared by Sukadev Goswami. How much more sweeter Srimad Bhagavatam is. Srimad Bhagavatam is so powerful. And when we talk about Namakirtan, when we talk about Sadhu Sangha, we get that by reading Srimad Bhagavatam. By reading Srimad Bhagavatam, we are having the association of all of our acharyas who have commented on Srimad Bhagavatam. And we read Prabhupada's purports. Prabhupada talks about, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said this, or Sridhar Swami said this, or Jiva Goswami said this. So you're not just reading what Prabhupada is saying, you're seeing what our acharyas have said about that. And then you're getting connected because through Krishna. The Bhagavad Gita is the words of Krishna, the song spoken by Krishna. But Srimad Bhagavatam is about Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna. And that is a part of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah. Vishwanath Chakravarti gives commentary on this very beautiful verse where Mahaprabhu is describing like Aradhyo Bhagavan Rajasatanaya Tadhama Vrindavanam. And in that verse, it talks about how Bhagavatam is like, it is the most powerful potency to read. It is the literary incarnation of Krishna in this world. And we have ample time now to read Srimad Bhagavatam. We're all at home. We don't have to commute. We don't have to, Austin traffic is not that bad, but we're not having to deal with Austin traffic. We have time now to read Srimad Bhagavatam. This opportunity is unparalleled, and it's unprecedented that we are given this time to read Srimad Bhagavatam, read our literatures, connect with Krishna this way. Radhika Raman Prabhu in one of his classes said a very beautiful, he was sharing a pastime with his spiritual master, His Holiness Hanuman Prekshak Maharaj. And Hanuman Prekshak Maharaj one day, he was with his disciples, and then he asked, how many chapters are there in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? And no one knew. And then he said, okay, how many chapters are there in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? Nobody knew. The Maharaj asked, okay, how many verses are there in the first canto, first chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam? Nobody knew. And then Maharaj just looks at them and he says, if you don't know that, how would you be able to recognize Krishna when he comes knocking at your door? You won't even recognize him. And I love that point, because it's like, if you want to know who Krishna is, you need to understand who Krishna is by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, by listening from our sadhus, by chanting the holy name. The more we find ways to connect ourselves with Krishna, whether it's through reading, chanting, or association, the more we are able to get connected with Krishna. And what better to read than Srimad Bhagavatam that has all pastimes of Krishna. We've been reading Krishna book for the past 3 months, and I can say for myself personally, it has been so revealing, because there were pastimes of Krishna I just didn't know existed. Like we just finished reading a section, and I've shared this with many of you in chapter 60 of Krishna and Rukmini having this conversation where Krishna is teasing Rukmini Devi. If you have not read chapter 60 of Krishna book, I highly recommend every grahastha has to read that. It is spectacular on the conversation with Krishna and Rukmini. But I didn't even know that pastime ever existed, right? And this is the beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam. Like every time you read it, you find new pastimes that you didn't know existed, or you come across something that you thought you knew, and then there's this other facet to it. So the more we're able to relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the more powerful it is. And just imagine, each of these limbs are so powerful by themselves. Imagine when they're combined, right? Like our right hand is powerful by itself, our left hand is powerful by itself. But when it comes together, it can do a lot more things. Imagine if you read Srimad Bhagavatam in association of devotees. So you just took something that is already relishable, the most nectarian, you took it to the next level because you're doing it with devotees. That is the beauty of this. The beauty of Bhagavad Shravana is like listening and reading of Srimad Bhagavatam and done in association makes it even more powerful. And we're so blessed in our generation that Srila Prabhupada has given us this in a format that we can understand. It's in English or in your regional language that you can understand. It is online. It is available on your iPad, your Kindle. Wherever you go, you can get Srimad Bhagavatam. So in the olden days, it was so difficult to have Srimad Bhagavatam, but that difficulty has been taken away for us. You know, if you don't like to read, there are so many classes of Srimad Bhagavatam online. That difficulty has been taken for us. Prabhupada used to say whenever he'd ask for something and people wouldn't know, Prabhupada would say, what is the difficulty? All of those difficulties have been erased for us to read Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's just a matter of us. Are you taking the opportunity? You know, Just as the way we ask, are you taking the opportunity of associating with devotees in your house? Are you taking opportunities of associating with holy name? Similarly, are you taking opportunity of associating with Srimad Bhagavatam, reading Srimad Bhagavatam? That is available in almost all of our bookshelves. And if you don't have a Srimad Bhagavatam in your bookshelf, you know who to contact. We will make sure you get a Srimad Bhagavatam in your bookshelf. So to make sure that that difficulty that you may have of not having a book is also removed. The fourth and the most interesting one is Mathurabas, residing in a holy place. In Nectar of Instruction, Rupa Goswami says, and I'm just going to read the English here in interest of time, the holy place known as Mathura is spiritually superior to Vaikuntha, the transcendental world, because the Lord appeared there. Superior to Mathura Puri is the transcendental forest of Vrindavan because of Krishna's Rasa Leela pastimes. And superior to the forest of Vrindavan is the Govardhan hill, for it was raised by the divine hand of Sri Krishna and was the site of his various loving pastimes. And above all, the super excellent Sri Radha Kund stands supreme, for it is overflooded with the ambrosial nectarian prema of Lord of Gokula, Sri Krishna. Where then is that intelligent person who is unwilling to serve this divine Radha Kund, which is situated at the foot of Govardhan hill? So in this verse, you can see Rupa Goswami stressing the importance of serving Dham, residing in the holy Dham. It's a privilege to reside in the holy Dham. It requires a lot of blessings, a lot of penances that have been done in the past life to reside in the holy Dham. Now today, we're all stuck here in our homes in Austin or wherever you reside, and you realize that there is no opportunity to go to the holy Dham anymore, right? And two things have come from this. One is we realize how much you take that for granted. Like, how much you took that for granted, that you could go to the holy Dham, whenever your vacation schedule permitted, or you could just go whenever you wanted. And then you realize now suddenly, oh, I can't go anymore now just like that. And you don't even know when you can go again. And that's scary. Because then we realize like how much granted we take this opportunity of residing in the Dham, even for a short time when we go there and we do like a quick blitzkrieg darshan that we take in temples there. So we talked about the first three and gave some practical tips on how we can do that, but how do we do Mathurabas while sitting here in Austin? In Srimad Bhagavatam, the answer to this is given. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is described that when you serve holy Vaishnavas are so powerful, pure Vaishnavas, that the Dham resides in the Vaishnavas. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Shanaka Rishi is talking to Suta Goswami, who is coming to describe to the sages of Naimisharanya, that is the verse that he uses to say that how powerful Suta Goswami is, that the entire holy dhams are residing in Suta Goswami. This is how we can serve the dham, by sitting in our homes, by serving pure devotees, by finding out how we can serve pure devotees to make their services easier, how we can help the pure devotees. Because when we serve the pure devotees, we are serving the holy dham directly. Because the dham resides in these pure devotees. So this is an easy, practical way for us to serve the dham, by serving the pure Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis who are trying their level best to spread the teaching of Krishna wherever. And then when you ask these Vaishnavas, how can we serve you? Chances are the Vaishnavas are actually going to list one of the previous three things that we talked about, like, reading more Prabhupada's books, reading, hearing more, chanting more, associating more. By doing all of that, and particularly doing that with pure devotees, or by the guidance of pure devotees and the mood of serving pure devotees, we are actually able to serve Dham. So if any of you are feeling a little bit, I know I am, if any of you are feeling like that you're shackled to your work chairs or you're shackled to your houses and you cannot wait to sit on that first flight to go to Mayapur or to go to Jagannath Puri or to go to Vrindavan, yeah, it's a real problem and it's a legit fear. It is a legit frustration that we can't do that. But by serving pure Vaishnavas, it is going to be non different than serving the holy Dham. So seek out a pure Vaishnava to serve, and believe me, you get the same results as serving the Dham. And the final limb that has been described is Murti Seva. Murti Seva Shraddhaya. It's actually deity worship with faith. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna himself is telling to Uddhava how one should worship him as a deity. Krishna says, Archadishu yada yatra shraddha mam tatra charchayet sarva bhuteshu atmani cha sarvat maham avastitaha. Whenever one develops faith in me, in my form as a deity or in other bona fide manifestations, one should worship me in that form. I certainly exist both within all created beings and also separately in my original form, since I'm the supreme soul of all. So Krishna here is telling us that one should worship the Lord in the deity form. And this chapter in the 11th canto, 1127, I highly recommend devotees to read it, because Krishna himself talks about how to do deity worship. Very beautiful chapter. But here you're seeing that the opportunity to serve the deities we have, it's in our houses, if we're fortunate enough to have deities in our house. But if not, we all have pictures in our house of the Lord. So we have an opportunity here to directly worship Krishna. And this is one of the best ways to have connection with Krishna. We started talking this class on how do we connect with Krishna by chanting, by associating, talking about Krishna, by reading about Krishna, by serving people who serve Krishna. Yeah, we can get connected to Krishna. But what more than to directly serve Krishna in the form of his deity? That is one of the most sweetest personal forms that Krishna gives us an opportunity to serve him. Even though in Kali Yuga, deity worship is not the recommended process it's not the recommended process where holy Sankirtan and chanting is recommended by our Shastras. Deity worship gives us a great way to connect actually with Krishna. It is very difficult for us without being connected to the deity to actually chant to Krishna directly. Because deities give us a form of Krishna that we can appreciate, a form of Krishna that we can relate to, a form of Krishna that we can fall in love with. And we see that each of us, many of us here have been very fortunate to have served in some temple or the other. And we have such a strong connection with that deity. And it's a connection that will never go away. Like, I don't mean to pick on devotees here, but I always make fun of Kirti, because even today when Kirti finishes Kirtan, she will sing Jai Radha Kunj Bihari. And it's been over 5 years since they left Detroit, but it's such a strong connection with Radha Kunj Bihari. There's a deity of Michigan in Detroit Temple. I know for me, I served in Toronto with the deities Radha Kishore Gopinath. So, when we sing that, we always go like, Jai Radha Gopinath Radha Kishore Gopinath Radhe. So you add that Kishore in between. So whenever devotees sing Jai Radha Gopinath, I will always like whisper the Kishore, because that's a deity I'm so connected with. And the more and more we connect ourselves with our deities, whether it's our home deities at a temple, the more we get connected to Krishna. That gives us more faith. And our deities, especially at home, devotees, deities at home are reciprocate with you. Deities at home are so compassionate. His Holiness Radha Raman Maharaj in a class he was quoting a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam and a conversation between Yudhishthir Maharaj and Narad Muni where they were talking about deity worship. I don't know the exact verse, but in that class, Radha Raman Maharaj very beautifully describes about how deities are when they're in the house. When the deities are in the temple belongs to them. They own the temple, they're the Lord's there. But when they come to your house, they come because you want them to come. Because they desire to come, but you also desire that the deities should have come to your home. So by the blessings of, Vaishnavas and Gurus, the deities come to your house. So deities understand when they come to your home on the mood of your house. Radha Raman Maharaj in the class very beautifully says that when Krishna is in the temple, he expects to be woken up in the morning. He expects sweet offerings in the morning. He expects a Mangal Arati. But when he comes to your house, Krishna will think, poor lady of the house, she had a late night yesterday, and in the morning she has to rush out, get her kids to school, she has to pack lunch every day. It takes time. So I want to make sure that, I understand if the only time she can wake me up is after 9 o'clock in the morning. I get that. Oh, today also I have to eat khichdi. That's okay. At least she's able to cook something and offer for me. I understand. It must be so difficult. Like these grahastas, like they're doing so much and still they have time to serve me. That's amazing. That is the mode of deities in our house. Like Krishna understands the circumstances we're in. And still sometimes we forget that. That the deities we're so fortunate to have deities in our house and we have this opportunity to serve them. And the more and more we serve them, the more we can develop faith in them. And the more we start to develop faith in them, the more our Shraddha increases. The more our Shraddha increases, we're able to follow the Bhakti Lata and get to Bhava stage, get to our Prema stage, and we get to finding true love of Krishna. And the more we develop a connection with the deities, our japa increases, our ability to read increases, everything increases. That's the beauty of these 5 limbs, right? If you start doing one, you start like putting a little effort in one, it's not just everything starts to become better. You know, I mean, I noticed this personally on daily worship. Like, it's something that I was never into. For in the last couple of years, I've been making more concentrated effort and improving my daily worship, and that has connected me with some devotees from outside of our temple, from other parts of the world, who are also who similar deities that they worship. So I reach out to them and we communicate about this. I have my sangha that way in associating with deities. When I read a verse, sometimes I read a verse and the verse reminds me, I should stitch an outfit of this color for my deities. So now it's helping me read better. So it's like one thing you do, it's like the domino effect is so spectacular. This is a domino effect you want, because in a domino effect, if you played with dominoes, you push one domino, everything falls down. But this domino effect is magical. Just like everything in Krishna consciousness, you push the domino, the others don't fall down, they rise up. So it goes against gravity. They just keep rising up. So the more and more we do any of these limbs of bhakti, each of the other limbs of bhakti get elevated as well. So this gives us an opportunity to, focus on these various limbs, and just doing a little bit of each of this will help us connect with Krishna more. So when we connect with Krishna, we start feeling the spark of joy. We start finding why Krishna is so special. And when we find the spark of joy, we truly feel succumb. We truly feel blissful in our execution of devotional service. And the way we connect with Krishna is we associate with devotees, we chant Krishna's holy name, we read Srimad Bhagavatam, we live or in a holy place or serve Vaishnavas who are representatives of the holy place, and we worship our deities with faith. So we started off this class, when we talked about how do you find world peace, or how do you find peace in general. And it's something that everyone is looking for. How do you find peace? And the simple way to find peace and find happiness is we discard the unfavorable. We enhance the favorable to connect to Krishna. And the more we enhance the favorable to connect to Krishna, we start to feel peaceful. And when we feel peaceful, we find the spark of joy. And I didn't have step 5 here, is because when we find that spark of joy, we fan that spark of joy. And then we share the spark of joy. And the more the cycle continues of feeling, finding, fanning, and sharing, life becomes so much more blissful. Jai, with that, thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Mataji, for that extremely fabulous class. Very nicely elaborating the 5 limbs of bhakti and how we can intensify our mood of surrender while practicing through those 5 limbs and finally find the spark of joy. Very wonderful class. Devotees, if you have any questions, please ask Mataji now, or you can post it on the chat window.